What's up, everybody? Brady Figel here, and today we're going to be talking about another one of my favorite albums. We are talking Killswitch Engage's seminal, landmark 2002 release, Alive or Just Breathing. Arguably the album that established metalcore and melodic metalcore as we know it today. And I really don't think this album gets appreciated enough for that. Obviously, Killswitch Engage's most beloved albums came with their next two, 2004's End of Heartache and 2006's As Daylight Dies. But I will argue tooth and nail that with this album, Killswitch Engage wrote the blueprints for metalcore. And obviously it's grown and evolved as the years have passed, because it sounds essentially nothing like it did back then. And this album really was a landmark moment for metalcore, just in the overall style of it, which essentially fused the two different styles of late 90s metallic hardcore with mid to late 90s melodic death metal, while also adding those clean choruses, although the clean choruses on this album definitely are still a bit rough around the edges. But when you have that fusion of those two styles and then incorporate the fact that Jesse Leach went on record saying that he wanted to make metal a bit more positive, it only makes sense that this album sounds exactly how it sounds. As far as Killswitch's discography for me, I always have a really hard time choosing which album is really their best. For me personally, and I know this is going to be a hot take, it's always a battle between this album and Incarnate. And you can actually watch my favorite albums video that I did on Incarnate last year. Check out my favorite albums playlist for that. So now let's get into the album and my favorite tracks from it. Well, I love all the tracks, but what parts and what songs I like the most. And to start by examining the tracks that specifically have that stylistic fusion that I was talking about, the first one that comes to mind for me is To the Sons of Man. This track is essentially like a 2-minute hardcore track, like a pure hardcore track with some melodeath inspired riffing kind of laced into it. There is that short little melodic part with those atmospheric, echoey, clean vocals before that monster of a riff sends the song off, which, by the way, has got to be one of the best Killswitch riffs ever. Just the stomp it has and that 6/4 timing, it's just a beast. The opening track, Number Days, is another really good instance of this. Just the way the song kicks off, just with those pounding drums and Jesse Leach just screaming, the time approaches, and then you get those ominous clean guitars kind of creeping in. I don't know if I should say clean guitars, they're still distorted guitars, but they have a very clean sound to them, I guess. This song just gets this album started on such a badass note. Another moment I love on this album that also really highlights the hardcore influence is that crushing breakdown at the end of the song Fixation on the Darkness. Again, it's in kind of a weird time signature. I think it is also in 6/4, which is actually a perfect segue into another point on this album and why I love it so much, is the impeccable use of odd time signatures. They are used to a T and fully embraced on some of these songs, most notably Life to Lifeless, which the majority of it is in 5/4. Temple from the Within kicks off in actually 9/4 timing. Really wonky there. You get that extra note thrown in. It just gives you that jolt that you would get from that time. And there are several other elements, such as the odd time signatures, that make this such a just musically amazing album. Those gradual tempo changes on the closing track, Rise Inside, they're so awesome. They're so smooth. And they make that track such a unique song, not just in Killswitch's catalog, but period. I also have to shout out just the overall experimental and unorthodox song structures that this album uses. It wasn't really until their next album, End of Heartache, that they really started to fall into that same mold of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. And listening back on this album, I literally don't think there is a single song on this album that uses that exact formula. They always have some kind of breakdown or some kind of added section in between parts, or they don't have all of those specific parts I just mentioned. Maybe they only have 2 choruses in the song, just something like that. And that even goes for the more like, I don't know if I want to say radio-friendly songs on here, but songs like My Last Serenade, obviously, and Element of One, which are a bit more melodic in general. Even those songs, they have unorthodox song structures. It's fucking awesome. Albums like this that utilize those unorthodox song structures, they keep you on your toes the whole time, and as a result, the album never feels predictable. They always feel like they're doing something new. Next, I have to talk about the riffing on this album. Some of these riffs are just absolute fucking monsters. Of course, My Last Serenade is one of my personal favorites from this album. Just that groove is irresistible. But as far as the deep cuts go, I mean, again, Fixation on the Darkness, all the riffing in that song. You have that main intro riff that, again, has that kind of layering going on between that lead part and those stomping, more breakdown-esque riffs underneath it. And then that first post-chorus riff is fucking awesome too, another one of my favorites on the album. And then again, you have that crushing breakdown to end the song. The pseudo title track on here, I guess, Just Barely Breathing, uses some real mean sounding tremolo riffs that also has more of an element of, like, I guess, doom metal to it a little bit, just in that slow, methodic pace it has. The bridge of the song Rise Inside, another awesome riff with that double bass under it. Those parts just flow together so well. It sounds like a lumbering machine grinding. And Temple from the Within too, when it slows down the tempo and you get that bass groove and then that just super murky, sludgy riff kicks in. Awesome moment too. And these are all like the more bottom heavy riffs on this album. I haven't even talked about songs like Self-Revolution, which as a whole song manages to use similar ideas in a sense that these riffs kind of all end on the same closing stanza, or closing measure, I guess would be the best way to put it if I'm being musically correct. If you listen to the outro of the song after that last chorus, that's the best example that basically embodies this entire song riff-wise, but it sounds so good, and it manages to get those parts stuck in your head without ever feeling repetitive. Another reason why I love this album so much is just because of the amazing, and I don't say this often, the amazing instrumental interlude track Without a Name. Anybody who watches my reviews knows how much I hate ambient interlude tracks or instrumental interlude tracks. Literally every album I have reviewed on this channel, with maybe the exception of one or two, I always talk shit about these type of tracks because I just find them to be disruptive and just overall non-essential to the album and unnecessary. But this song, Without a Name, is absolute perfection. What this song does is it takes the emotions that this album has established and pushed to the forefront and just stripped them down, but also amplified them at the same time. As in, they're stripped down stylistically in a sense that it's pretty much just an acoustic guitar and later some more ominous ambiance, but they're amplified in a sense that that acoustic guitar section is just so warm and calming and beautiful, and that lurking, almost like creepy sounding ambient noise that ends up drowning it out is just so fucking dark and dismal in like the best way possible. And you get those tortured, echoey vocals in the background. And the transition into the next track, Rise Inside, is just, this song is perfection. I cannot think of a better example of an ambient interlude track being pulled off well than this song. And sort of on the same vein as just portraying raw emotion in the music, another one of my favorite aspects about this song is Jesse Leach's vocals. His screams on this album are just so fucking raw. Like My Last Serenade, when he hits those high screams in the verses, great example of that. The breakdown, again, on Fixation on the Darkness too, also the ending of Rise Inside, also the ending to the album, I guess. And his cleans are some of the most soulful, clean vocals I have literally ever heard. Yeah, they're a little rough around the edges, but that just makes them so much more emotional. Favorite instance of this, Numbered Days, Self-Revolution, My Last Serenade, of course, and also Rise Inside. His clean vocals on those songs in particular, but also this whole album, are just so beautiful. This album also is so beautifully produced, especially given the fact that it came out in 2002. Killswitch Engage sound better than ever on this album, although their production has remained pretty consistent throughout their career, but it just goes to show how ahead of its time this album was produced, so major props to Adam D on that front. As far as tracks I haven't talked about yet, Vide Infra also appeared on their first album actually, but this song is just relentless the whole time. I especially love that, like, those gallops, those bass drum gallops with those more like mean sounding open chords being played over them. I thought that was super creative. And the two bonus tracks on this album are killer as well. I normally don't even talk about bonus tracks, but like In the Unblind literally sounds like 90s In Flames. And When the Balance is Broken has this real urgent feeling this entire time that is capped off by this awesome stomping melodic chorus with some real, again, urgent sounding snare drums driving it forward. This is just such an amazing album. Lyrically too, it's amazing. Jesse Leach talks about things like unity, but also personal struggles and depression, anxiety, things like that. Self-discovery and triumph. This album is just beautiful, and it holds a really special place in my heart just because of when I discovered it. On a personal note, it was around the time that I lost a family member that I was close with. And this album, with its just overall emotional energy to it, really helps me through that. So yeah, I absolutely love this album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. And if for some reason you have not heard it, go check it out, especially if you're a fan of metalcore. But anyways, that's about all I have for you guys for this video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Definitely comment your thoughts on this album below if you are familiar with it. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace.